Welcome to the Content Podcast, conversations with Silicon Valley's creatives. I'm Daniel Garcia, your host and the cultivator of Content Magazine, published by SV Creates.
Hello, this is Karen.
Today we talk with Karen Kienzle. She's the director of the Palo Alto Art Center. Hey Karen, this is Daniel. Thank you for taking time to be on the podcast.
Yes, I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Yeah. And I'm not sure if we've actually met each other in person. I did troll a little bit online, of course, to get some backstory on you. But you do look very familiar. So I'm sure we have ran in similar circles throughout the arts world.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've been in Silicon Valley for many, many years.
How many years is many?
Oh, goodness. Well, I actually grew up in Palo Alto, so it's really quite remarkable that I'm working in the city that I grew up in. I did go to college in UC Berkeley and San Francisco State, but most of my career has been in Santa Clara County.
Yeah, because you were at the Museum in San Jose, the Museum of Art.
I was.
And then also at Santa Clara,
Correct.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so and for most of your career, you have been involved in kind of curation and museum work. I'm really curious what got the bug in order to move into that realm of kind of like the arts world. How'd
Yes.
that come to be?
Yes. Actually, the strongest predictor of whether you go to a museum as an adult is if you went to a museum as a child.
Yeah.
My family actually, we lived in Alexandria, Virginia for a few years growing up. And when I was growing up, and we went to the museums in Washington, D.C. every weekend.
Wow. Yeah.
And I tell a story about going to the National Portrait Gallery and just seeing walls and walls of old white men on the
Yeah.
walls, and then seeing a Mary Cassatt painting
Yeah.
of a little girl,
Yeah.
and seeing myself represented in that image, and how profound that was for me. I became obsessed with Mary Cassatt. I was actually Mary Cassatt for Halloween in fourth grade. Which
In fifth grade, you said?
fourth grade.
Oh, fourth. Wow, that's even earlier.
I
Wow.
know, right? Yeah. My
Yeah.
brother was a magician and I was Mary Cassatt. So I would have to explain to my friends that I was an American impressionist artist. But
Wow.
for
Yeah,
me,
that's good.
it's that, the importance of being able to see yourself represented in a museum and how profound that is. And I have become a really intense museum geek as a result.
Yeah. That's incredible that in fourth grade that you would
Yeah.
dress up like an impression artist. I mean, I don't think when I was in the fourth grade, I had put together, you know what I mean? Like artists in that kind of way. So that's pretty incredible. So now do you have your own art practice, or have you always been kind of more in kind of the curation and the appreciation aspect of it?
Definitely. I have at various points had an artistic practice. Right now, everything is kind of channeled into my professional and volunteer life. I think when I was working as a curator, that was a little bit more of a creative practice. And when I became a director, I told many of my friends and colleagues, and were told that I was moving to the dark side of administration and management. But I actually do feel that running an art center, engaging with the community, coordinating with staff is actually a really kind of creative practice.
Oh, yeah.
I do feel that way. And I feel like, certainly right now, everything we're doing is about thinking in new ways and trying to
Yeah.
innovate and be creative.
Well, that's the thing. I think, that is true. I mean, like so many times people think of artistic or creative means you have to paint or something like
Mhm.
that. But if you're an accountant, you're creative with numbers. If you're, you know what I mean? That idea of innovation, creation, thinking outside the box and developing goes across from being a chef to photography to music to even arts administration. Yeah.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah. So when then did you really kind of move to that what you call like you're telling people you went to the dark side? What when was it like you said, like, yeah, this is really like my calling or purpose or direction I want to go in?
Yeah, so I've always loved museums, and again, went to museums as
Hmm.
a child. Decided I wanted to get my undergraduate degree in art history, and wasn't quite clear what I wanted to do with that. It was actually after my bachelor's degree that I got really excited about museum studies and went through the program at San Francisco State University and became very committed to working in a museum,
Hmm.
and really feeling like I wanted to contribute there. Um, and also really excited about a whole kind of trend called the new museology, which was really about thinking about museums in different ways, a greater sense of relevance, community engagement.
Hmm.
And I feel like museums have a lot of work to do, but I
Hmm.
continue to love them, and I'm invested in us doing the work to make museums better.
Yeah.
So there's a lot we have to do.
Yeah. So when you started out doing art history, were you kind of thinking maybe you'd be like a teacher or a professor or something along those lines, and then
Yeah.
the museum kind of came out through your studies and stuff?
Yep. 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 Yep.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the new museumization. Is that what you called it? What's the
New museology.
museology? Yeah, yeah,
Yes. Yeah, so really rethinking museums, and so, of course, the new museology actually came out of the UK probably a decade before Nina Simon's book, The Participatory Museum, which, of
hmm,
course, has been, like, a really important, text to
yeah,
really get museum people to think differently, and it's really about, ensuring that museums are there's a great Stephen Weil quote, "Instead of about something, for someone."
cool, awesome,
So, really thinking about how we engage with our community. And increasingly now, it's about do we represent the community in our programming and our collections with our staff,
yeah.
and really working to ensure a kind of porous, transparent kind of relationship with the community.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I guess that's probably why, I mean, working for the city of Palo Alto for the Palo Alto Art Center, that's much more of a community participatory engagement than necessarily even a museum is in our
Yeah.
traditional view of
Yeah.
museum, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, we are non-collecting, which is kind
yeah.
of amazingly liberating. I've worked in collecting organizations before, and museum collections are really important and kind of critical. But I feel like not having a collection has really liberated us. There's a lot of interesting stuff actually happening around museum permanent collections right now, in terms of deaccessioning, in terms of oh, that's my cat. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay, no problem.
So I'm talking, and so he thinks I'm talking to
He
him.
wants to get in on the conversation, yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, so what's the liberating aspect then of, not, collecting? What would you say? What's the thing that you feel the most?
Well, I think that our identity, our kind of curatorial philosophy, our programmatic identity can change. When you have a collection, it tends to define who you are as an institution, in
Okay.
terms of what you might program and what you might show. And not having that is again, really quite beneficial. Also,
Hmm,
collections are really expensive.
yeah.
They're expensive in terms of storage and in terms of staffing, and not having those expenses are also liberating.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So, and I would think, I mean, since, the art center is from the city, therefore it's
Mhm.
supported somewhat with taxpayers'
Mhm.
funds. Not that museums don't get, private funds and public funds and stuff like that too. But um, that means, I guess the whole role of what you're doing is really engaging, inspiring, and maybe amplifying the voices there within Palo Alto. Is that kind of the role that the art center plays?
Yes. And so the Art Center was actually started in 1971. And it was really started by the community and for the community. So, our kind
Okay.
of founding story is that we're in the former City Hall building for the city of Palo Alto. And the city basically outgrew the building and started to look at other locations for City Hall and identified a location and a building in downtown Palo Alto. And so there was this
Hmm.
City Hall, former City Hall building that was available. And there were a lot of community proposals around what to do with that building. And ultimately, it was a really dedicated group of community volunteers who lobbied intensively to turn it into an art center. And
Yeah, that's
so
incredible.
we opened in 1971, and I tell this story that's like, I love it so much. When we opened, we had a card catalog that had little cards
Oh,
for
yeah.
like community members who were artists, or if someone had an interesting collection. And so you could basically kind of go through those cards to find someone in the community
Wow.
who had a similar interest, or who was an artist who had a particular kind of artistic technique. So,
Wow.
so again,
Yeah.
this notion of kind of a community art center coming out of, it's very interesting too. I think in the area, so many institutions were started in the early 70s.
Yeah.
So many museums, art centers, community theaters were started in the late 60s, early 70s. And so I think there's it's a testament to like collective action and everyone getting
Yeah.
together to make a difference in the community. And so this is the first municipal position that I've had. And it's
Okay.
been incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
We are city supported, but we also have a 501(c)(3) nonprofit that supports us in fundraising and advocacy, the Palo
Yeah.
Alto Art Center Foundation. So we essentially
Yeah.
operate as a public private partnership in the community.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Um, yeah.
So then and your role as the director, I mean, you're not only overseeing the vision, but the budget, the staff, and the foundation as well as the center, correct?
Yes,
That's a lot of hats to wear.
it is indeed. It is. It is. And I will say that, Palo Alto is a really engaged community, and it's a community that really cares about community resources like parks. I mean, like the art center, we have a children's theater, we have a junior museum and zoo.
Yeah.
I talk about Palo Alto being this incredible place to live, to work, to grow up, and to visit,
Yeah.
because of all of these incredible community resources that the community really is invested in. So the fact that we have the support of the community from a public perspective, but then we also have the individual philanthropic support of the community makes us incredibly strong as an organization.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. So then that comes to then with that incredible support and resources. I mean, Palo Alto is heavy in resources, and now also hearing just about the community want to be involved in the arts. What is the vision that you're kind of trying to cast for the Palo Alto Arts Center? What's the direction or the voice, if you will, that I mean, you're at the helm, right? So you get to do it all yourself. You may, you know,
There's, we have an extraordinary
yeah,
team of staff and board members and volunteers who help make everything happen.
sure. But what for
Yeah,
you? And I don't mean sure like I'm
yeah,
downplaying that. I'm saying, of
no,
course,
no,
everybody works
yeah.
together as a team. But for you, what do you see the vision for Palo Alto Arts Center? What's the direction you want to move in?
Yeah, so, we're approaching our 50th anniversary as an organization, so
Oh
there's,
yeah,
like, a sense of, like, gravitas and kind of,
yeah,
like, maturity in that,
yeah,
um, and, we did a whole strategic planning process, before COVID, and the vision is really how we integrate art into daily life. How
hmm,
do we make art an essential aspect of daily life? The Art Center is an incredibly accessible facility. It's one of the things I've always loved about it. We're right next to the library. There's
hmm,
a writer who talks about the fact that um, when we're all in elementary school, we typically go to the library. We
yeah,
learn what a library is. We learn how to use a library, but there's
yeah,
no kind of analogous experience for a museum. So we don't
Yeah.
necessarily know that museums are there for us, that they are often free, that there are opportunities for kind of learning and for leisure. And so just the fact that we're like, we almost seem like an extension in some ways off the library.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we're incredibly accessible. We offer programs for all ages. And so, this idea of really integrating the Art Center as a critical aspect to everyday life is where we would love to go.
Okay. So, um, integrating just in everyday life. So, art for art, let's say even more than art, like expression, would you say?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so the vision is to kind of help the whole community engage and
Yep.
participate in their expression. So, what role do you see art in general playing within a community? How does it help the strength and health of a community?
So, I mean, I feel really strongly that the community needs art to be whole, right? I
Yeah,
believe in museums being, economic catalysts,
yeah,
critical aspects to actually drawing people into a community. And we hear again and again from residents about how lucky they are to live in a community that has a place like the Palo Alto Art Center. I mean, that's kind of very, very resonant.
yeah,
Um, so, I mean, right now during COVID, I mean, I feel like I keep talking about the fact that art helps. It
yeah.
really helps. I mean, you're likely aware of the COVID-19 study that La Placa Cohen did, and I'm sorry, that's my cat Dante, and in the
Dante.
background.
Oh, what a
Um,
great name.
so Lepecca Cohen did a big study about kind of arts and culture engagement during COVID, and 81% of participants said that they were doing something creative during
Yeah, yeah,
quarantine. And that wasn't necessarily drawing, it could have been cooking, it could
yeah,
have been listening to music or making music. And increasingly, there's an understanding that arts engagement is really expansive. It doesn't necessarily have to be a kind of traditional artistic practice. But I think that was really important. 81% of people
yeah,
from the
yeah,
survey felt that they needed to do something creative during this very challenging time. And I feel, I've been doing presentations in the community talking about how art helps. I truly believe that. We
yeah,
see it every day at the Art Center. So we had to close yesterday, along with every other
yeah.
museum in Santa Clara County, which was very sad. And we can talk about that if you want to
Right.
talk
Yeah,
about that. But we have been offering classes outdoors for adults and
yeah.
children. And so we hear again and again from parents whose kids are on computers all day, who are completely zoomed out, that having
Right.
the experience of a hands on class in person is transformational.
Yeah,
For our adult studio participants, their ability to participate in classes. We're doing a curbside program. We have a pottery wheel rental program, and then we have
awesome.
outdoor classes. It's a sense of normalcy. It's an opportunity to connect with other people, albeit socially distanced.
Yeah,
It's an opportunity to kind of be connected with the community. It's an opportunity to express yourself, to escape. I mean, that's also, I
yeah,
think, a really important thing that art is providing right now, just a diversion for people.
yeah, yeah. It's so interesting. I think that in some ways, I think formalized, museums and galleries in some ways have hindered the understanding of what art is.
Yeah,
Because if you leave someone alone, they're going to do something creative, right? I mean, it's just a natural flow of who we are. I mean, people
yeah,
play the guitar or something to because they want to sing and express themselves, and that's an art form, but they may not think of themselves like an artist in that, or you pick up a stick and you start whittling it, or you make
yeah,
furniture, it's so much
yeah,
the expression of who we are. And
yeah,
so I guess you're helping in that, bring that to a community, right? Like,
yeah.
hey, explore your inner
Indeed.
artist.
Indeed, and, I hear all the time, "Oh, I'm not an artist," or,
Right.
I can't draw, I'm not an artist," and it's so sad to hear people say that because, I mean, ultimately, we believe in the fact that everyone is an artist ultimately. And,
Yeah.
Picasso had a quote about, every child is an artist. The challenge is staying an artist as you grow up. And I think
Yeah.
unfortunately it's like our educational systems that told kids that they couldn't draw and therefore they're not an artist, or they were told that they couldn't survive as an artist, and so therefore they kind of squashed that part of themselves. So
Yeah. Yeah.
we really want to create opportunities for everyone to feel like they can participate in creativity.
Yeah. So when you were doing art yourself of some sort, other than kind of helping build an art community, what was your kind of like medium and style that you were working
I
in
took
your form?
ceramics classes at the art center. And so
Ah, okay.
the
Yeah.
ceramics I mean, I totally appreciate the fact that, and I should say that, before COVID, even now during COVID, I mean, the ceramics classes we offer are some of the most popular classes,
Yeah.
and I think that that's a direct response to people feeling digitally oversaturated. And there's
Sure.
something really satisfying about working with clay. It's really tactile. It's just a really, really satisfying creative process.
Yeah. So that's what you really enjoy it even to this day
Yes.
is kind of yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So do you, I mean, now that, I mean, I'm working at home, do you have yourself your nice big tea or coffee cup that you've made yourself or
I
that
have
you
some pieces in my house that I have made for sure, but yeah, I'm actually not drinking out of them.
Okay. Are they more vases that you've made or something
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that or
yeah, yeah, and then, they're in various parts of the house. So I was, really interested in kind of experimenting with kind of surface design. There's actually like one of the like, this is random, but one of the
yeah.
TV shows that I'm actually currently kind of obsessed with is The Great Throwdown. It's a British ceramic competition
Oh.
show.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's amazing. So it's all of the great things about the Great British Baking Show in terms of like lack of drama, a creative process, interesting challenges, but it's all clay.
Oh, that's
And so
awesome.
it's pretty great. It's on HBO.
Yeah, that's cool. Have you ever done like figures or anything with doing with clay rather than just kind of like on the wheel, you know?
Yeah, no, I usually am kind of wheel with hand building. I'm not
Mhm.
figurative sculpture, but I know
Yeah.
that there's some great artists that do amazing figurative sculpture in clay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's been my thing.
That's incredible. Cool. So, as far as then, okay, I gotta get back on track because I started thinking about the clay stuff.
Mhm.
Get lost. I'm gonna edit this all out.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I just want to talk about a little bit about some of the. Well, let's go this. So then, for you, what? So you know, kind of like clay, that tactile kind of feeling. But
Mhm.
what else do you kind of do, especially in this time, to kind of take care of yourself? I mean, you have that's a pretty, you have a, a team that you're working with, a community, you're a city organization, government organization. So you got the pressures of that kind of
Yeah.
stigma
Yeah.
of the government.
Yeah.
What does Karen do to kind of your own take care of your soul?
Yeah. Well, I should also mention, as you probably have seen if you've looked me up online, I also teach part-time. And so
Yeah.
while that has been like another stress in some way, it actually has been
Hmm.
uh, a consistent opportunity to kind of revive. So
Yeah.
I love working with students. I teach in the museum studies program at San Francisco State.
Yeah.
And we're teaching online on Zoom, which has its challenges. But I think that that has been a really valuable ongoing kind of practice. And
Yeah.
I also feel like it's a little creative, and having the opportunity to engage a whole group of emerging museum professionals in a field
Yeah.
that is a really important and valuable field.
Yeah.
When we had class and the election had not yet been determined, I said the same thing to my students as I said to the art center staff, that I feel really strongly that there is an opportunity for museums right now.
Mhm.
And I don't
Yeah.
know what that is, but I feel like there's such division right now in this country, and so
Yeah.
many concerns about lack of empathy and kind of distrust of critical thinking.
Yeah.
Museums can play a really important role, and I don't know what it is, and I might not have the answer, but my students will probably have the answer. And I will also
Yeah.
say that, like, my students are entering, like, the worst museum job market that I think has ever existed.
Yeah.
You know, layoffs have been significant. You know, there was a study that came out a few months ago that indicated that a third of museums could close permanently by the end
Wow.
of this
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
It's bad. And so, trying to kind of help them find their way is actually a really kind of valuable and rewarding process for me. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that I also volunteer at a museum organization, the California Association of Museums, that has been doing some active advocacy work to try to encourage the state to allow museums to actually open in the purple tier.
Oh,
Because,
yeah.
as you may know, shopping malls are open, commercial galleries
Right.
are open, but museums aren't. So
Yeah.
that has also been really rewarding. So that's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
part of the kind of, it's like a little bit of professional self-care, but it's very different from the job that I do on a day-to-day basis. Um,
Yeah.
but then, you know, I'm a huge fan of self-care. And so, you know, having a yoga practice, being able to exercise every day. I also have really found that, like, cooking is really meaningful right now. So being able to,
Yeah.
like, cook healthy food and to share that food with people, and um,
Yeah.
it's been really kind of, it's taken on this, like, symbolic importance in a way that it never has before. I think with this tremendous emphasis on health, and also, like, you know, the fact that we're all sequestered, and
Yeah.
this yeah it, that so that's been kind of increasingly important. I have a great
What's your
sourdough
what's
starter, by the
yeah,
way.
what's your go-to dish that you make? What's
So I have I have a CSA box that I get, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
great, and so that's also been, like, a really wonderful source of creativity during shelter in place, because I don't
Yeah.
necessarily know what I'm going to get, and
Yeah,
it's
because
like,
it
oh,
shows it
turnip.
shows up with a turnip and
Yeah, turnips, yeah, exactly.
mushrooms, and you're like, "What do I make out of this?"
Exactly. So there consistently has been these, like, beautiful, like, rainbow charts, and so
Yeah.
I do a really nice polenta, cheddar polenta with
Oh,
a
nice.
chard, and then, like, salmon and an egg on top. But
Yeah. Huh.
an ovo-lacto pescatarian, so no land animals.
Okay, yeah. That sounds delicious, polenta. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, so then, what is it that you find what is the aspect of teaching, what aspect of that do you find most rewarding? Is it yeah, I won't give any clues. You
Yeah,
have
I
to,
mean, I think it's the relationship with students,
yeah,
and the opportunity to maybe, provide or encourage them to kind of see a perspective around museums that they weren't aware of before. Um, you know, right now I'm teaching a fundraising class.
yeah,
So, you know, my goal is to encourage the students to think about fundraising as a creative practice and a really meaningful practice, because
yeah,
people are afraid of fundraising. They're
yeah,
petrified of fundraising. You know,
yeah,
the very first class I ask, you know, what is fundraising and how do we feel about it? And, you know, people have a lot of intense emotions around
yeah,
fundraising, and usually they're negative. And so,
right,
you know, my goal is, by the end of the class, to be able to have at least one student who might be interested in pursuing fundraising. And, you know, one of the things that's a reality in the field is that, the students that I've had over the years who've actually moved into fundraising careers, they're employed, and they're actually
yeah,
a few years out of graduate school, they're in senior positions, and they find that their careers are really rewarding.
yeah,
And so that's another thing that I think is really valuable. If I can encourage students to see that fundraising is actually kind of a critical aspect to what we do in the nonprofit sector and in the museum sector, and to really
yeah,
understand that it's actually incredibly meaningful if you're, you know, if you're working in the right institution that has values that mirror your own. Being
right.
able to engage people in that is really, really amazing.
What would be one uh, nugget or point, just like a little catchphrase of fundraising or like, you know what I mean? Like a little
Yeah.
nugget you would want to give people.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's about fundraising. I really think it's about engaging people in your institution, and uh, that's easy to do if you work for an institution that's doing great things, and
Yeah.
hopefully you are. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
hopefully you believe in the work of that institution, and if you do, it's really easy to engage people around it, and that's all fundraising is.
Yeah, so it's basically it's just inviting people to participate really on a
Yes,
different level.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
that's
so
awesome.
much of what we do in contemporary museums is collaborative. And so we're always working with other people to kind of achieve our vision. And
Yeah.
whether that's working with artists to engage the community in an exhibition, or it's engaging with donors to bring in an artist that we wouldn't be able to without their support.
Yeah. Um, so when I think of, like kind of like the movement that's going on with art and community building, just kind of, um, the more kind of like, I think expansion of awareness of kind of inequities and injustice that's going on. Um, how do you see the Palo Alto Art Center um, speaking and moving in that place? And I don't,
Yeah.
I'm a San Josean, so and I
Yep.
love Palo Alto, but of course it's definitely a different demographic than San Jose
Mhm.
in some ways.
Yeah.
So when I think of Palo Alto, I do get a stereotype. So what is the ways that Palo Alto and that you're kind of leading in that conversation of what justice and equity would look like for that region?
Yes. Well, I mean, we definitely see ourselves as part of a larger ecosystem, and we see ourselves as having a responsibility to help to diversify the museum field as a whole.
Yeah,
So, we launched a program that was generously funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services that continues, it's going to continue for a couple more years, that has allowed us to pay all of our interns.
yeah,
And this is a program that actually engages diverse youth,
mm,
diverse in ethnicity and also ability level, to
yeah,
work with us as interns and to be able to pay our interns so that for those interns who don't have a safety net, they can actually participate, and hopefully we can engage them, create a positive experience so that they want to continue to pursue careers in the museum field. So
yeah,
that's one piece. The other piece is in terms of programming. So where we closed an exhibition. um, we had to close our exhibition that was focused on trees and contemporary art early,
yeah,
unfortunately, due to COVID and shelter in place. But that exhibition included a series of work by Azucena Hernandez, who created a series called the Ember Series. They're wood burned portraits on like
awesome.
wood slices of individuals who were killed due to police violence, people of
Mm,
color. The
mhm,
really extraordinary pieces that are really moving because the trees are the rings of the trees are signifying years of life, and the idea
right,
that these individuals lives were cut short, and the pieces are really about memorial. We were able to organize a conversation with Azuzana over the summer, when it was clear that we were not going to be able to reopen the show again.
yeah,
And we're planning an exhibition. So our next exhibition, which we're really hoping we'll be able to open as planned in January, is focused on new American artists.
oh,
And so
cool.
we're doing a residency with the Sanctuary Print Project, which is a collaborative endeavor by Sergio Della Torre and Chris Trigari.
Mhm,
And they engage in participatory printmaking, which is a little bit hard right now due to COVID.
yeah, yeah,
But they also do public projects that are really about sharing the voices of immigrants. And they're particularly concerned right now about the impact of COVID 19 on the immigrant community. So we'll be working with them on a residency. We'll also have an exhibition in the main gallery space featuring artists, new American artists, contemporary artists. And then the exhibition that we have coming in May is an exhibition called the Black Index, which is focused on African American artists drawing, where
mm,
the drawing is really intended to be an alternative to the photographic image,
okay,
and really about African American artists kind of asserting their own. voice and
Yeah.
identity. So that's going to feature Lava Thomas, who's a local artist, and also Titus Kafar, who you may know, got his start in San Jose. So Titus is an international art superstar at this point, who did the really extraordinary portrait of George Floyd and his mother that was on the Time magazine cover.
Yeah.
And so he actually got his bachelor's degree at San Jose State. So many of us know Titus from back in those days. So
Yeah.
he'll be part of the exhibition as well. So
That's
I
cool.
think looking at kind of equity from an internal perspective in terms of how do we diversify our staff. As part of that initiative, we did some diversity, equity, inclusion, and access work on the staff level, but then it's also programming. So really looking
Yeah.
at what we're doing in terms of our programming. We also have an exhibition coming up in the fall that's going to be focused on the art of disability culture, which we're really excited about.
Cool.
Um, so, so those are kind of
Yeah.
two parts.
Yeah. That's great. How do you balance then, with the different venues that you have and programs that you have? Because you do teaching as well as, you know, gallery space. Um, how do you kind of match between local and national or international or regional artists? What's kind of like the way that you approach that?
Yeah, so it's just a kind of ongoing balance, and I think that there's an expectation that we're going to feature artists who are local, but also an expectation that we're going to bring artists from around the world to the community. So
Yeah.
it's just trying to figure out how to do that in a way that makes sense. And one way that we've done that is through thematic exhibitions.
Yeah.
So we try to shy away from single person shows, and really look at kind of engaging and accessible themes for our exhibitions that from which we can kind of feature artists who are coming from a broad range of perspectives, local or
Yeah.
you know beyond local.
Yeah. Now, do you also run the Coverly Center as well, the art studios over
That is
there?
part of the city of Palo Alto, but not part of my program. So
Okay.
the city of Palo Alto has an amazing public art program, which is
Yeah.
led by my amazing colleague Elise DeMarzo, and a public art commission. So they do public art and they run the Coverly Studio program.
Yeah. But I think that's what a great kind
Oh
of
yeah.
connection that they have going on in Palo
Mhm.
Alto with those artist studios as well as
Yeah.
what you're doing from education and
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Now,
I
so
should
tell me
make
a
a
little.
quick shout out
I'm
for,
Yeah,
Robin
yeah.
Mullery, who is a current, Coverly artist, and Robin initiated an exhibition that's actually up at the Art Center right now, which we had to prematurely close, called Holding It Together, which is, Robin, was in a residency program that the Art Center started a few years ago for parent artists in
Mhm.
conjunction with an exhibition, about the art of parenthood, and these artists have continued to work together. So they proposed an exhibition at the Art Center that was basically their work in response to parenting during a pandemic. Um,
Yeah.
and
I
it
was
was just
just
kind
gonna
of,
ask you
yeah.
about that.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Okay.
No,
So
no, this is great. Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
We'd actually we canceled our fall shows because, of course, the whole experience for everyone who's running a museum right now, or,
yeah,
some shelter in place was, can we open? Oh, it looks like we can open. Oh, no, there's no way we can open. We're probably not going to be able to open at
yeah,
all. And so
yeah,
it was like back and forth. We canceled what we had planned for the fall. And then Robin reached out with this idea of maybe a virtual exhibition. And I was like, we have an empty
yeah,
gallery. So why don't we create the exhibition? And I don't know if we're going to be able to open, but at least it can exist in physical space. And
yeah,
we were able to open for 2 weeks before we had to close. So
yeah,
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 the Coverly Artist Studio program is amazing, and we collaborate with them in many different ways.
yeah, that's cool. So you have currently online, Holding It Together, that's
Yep.
like parenting and COVID, and then also you did the kind of like the Susan O'Malley
Yes.
posters
Yes.
about too, and what was so this is kind of adapting
Yep.
within COVID, right?
Yep.
So what have you done to adapt, and tell me about those
Yes.
programs?
Yeah. So during shelter in place, one of the things that happened, which was unfortunate, is we had a giant Patrick Dougherty sculpture that was installed, and we had actually that was our second Patrick Dougherty sculpture. So Patrick Dougherty is a North Carolina artist who creates these giant kind of basket sculptures made of typically willow, but
Mhm.
sustainable material. And he had come out 4 years ago to create a piece, a site-specific piece for us that was much beloved in the community. And
Yeah.
we had done a crowdfunding campaign to support that work, and people loved it. And those pieces have a finite life, and our previous piece had lasted for 5 years. I mean, 5 years is about, Patrick says, like the longest you can get out of them. And so
Yeah.
over the summer, it started to kind of lose its structural integrity, and it was clear like we need to wood chip the piece, and that's essentially what you do. It's completely natural, so you wood chip it, and then all the wood chips can go out in
To
various garden
mulch.
areas.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we needed to put something else in that place. I mean, it's certainly, Embarcadero Road is such a major thoroughfare. It's not a really utilized grassy area, so it's like the
Yeah.
perfect place to do a project. And we collaborated with a public art program to essentially revisit a project we had done with Susan back in 2012. So when the art center reopened after a renovation project, I had worked with artists to create community engaged projects for an exhibition that was called Community Creates. So
Mhm.
I had kind of worked to identify artists, and then I worked with them to think about a way that they would engage the community for a project that would exist at the art center. And so Susan had this idea that she would interview 100 people in the community and ask them, what advice would you give your 8-year-old self, and what advice
Yeah.
would you give your 80-year-old self? And she
Yeah.
found this like old school printer in Oakland, letterpress printer, who actually was then later featured in a New York Times article with illustrations by Wendy McNaughton. He's just super, super old school, this massive press. And he normally does like, you know, rodeo posters and stuff. And
Yeah.
so she did this great poster run of the pieces, and they lived at the art center, and they also lived out in the community. And it was such a positive project and such a loved project, and it was a project that she continued. There was a Chronicle Books published that project posthumously after she passed. And
Yeah.
so when I was thinking about like what could we do, I started to think about, wouldn't it be amazing to have Susan O'Malley posters out there? And so we started to talk to the estate about how we might be able to do that. And interestingly, Villa Montalvo, or excuse me, the Montalvo Art Center
Yeah.
had done a similar billboard project with Susan's work. And so it was, I think the estate found it really interesting that there was this desire to kind of revisit Susan's work. We felt really strongly that the community needed Susan's work more than ever.
Yeah.
All that work was really about looking inside to find resiliency and strength within yourself, and also the ability. Susan talked about how she felt like people were really disconnected, and this was a project that really connected people together. And so
Yeah.
those were all things we were really thinking about.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, for how much do you in your schedule, how much are you actually involved in the curation of a thing versus the budget? Like, like how does your time break down?
Yeah. So we have had curators at the art center. We've had amazing staff members who've worked as curators. We've also had periods where we haven't had that position. And so when we haven't had that position, I have taken a more active role
Mhm.
in that work. And so, unfortunately, we do not have that position currently. And so, I think my role is more of like a creative director, trying to find the right guest
Sure.
curators to come in and do the projects that we want to see happen.
Yeah. Yeah. So then for you for the art center, for the Palo Alto Art Center with this time of COVID, what does that mean for you guys programmatically, budget wise? We know that of course you have to close things and
Yeah,
the in person, yeah. But as far as like what does it look like for the the future
yeah, yeah.
because of budget and stuff?
Yeah. So the city of Palo Alto has faced some profound budget challenges. And so this
Yeah,
fiscal year, the Art Center had to deal with the most significant budget cuts that we
yeah.
have ever had to deal with as an organization in our entire history. And it's been really challenging. I mean, I've been at the organization for 11 years and really kind of have been working to build up programs and support. And I had to let people go, and it was
Um, yeah,
it
yeah,
was really awful. And so, but at the same time, we were feeling like the need for what we were doing was more important than ever.
yeah,
And so, and I think that that has really helped to kind of fuel me in the ongoing work during a period that was really dark around how are we going to continue to operate with a significantly reduced staff.
yeah,
But it was getting this feedback from the community that they needed us to do what we could. And then getting
yeah,
the feedback that when we started doing virtual programs, the amazing positive response that we received, it just kept us going. And I think
yeah,
was really important.
yeah,
So, I mean, I really do feel like the community needs what we provide. Um, and I know that the community would love us to be able to offer classes indoors, which we can't. But even what we've been able to provide in terms of outdoor classes has been really transformational for people.
yeah,
For a lot of our community who are sheltering in place, the virtual programs that we've been offering have been really valuable.
yeah.
My cat Dante is very vocal about this. He's
That's
been
okay.
sheltering in place. His entire
Right.
life has been sheltering in place.
Right, exactly. They don't know any difference.
He doesn't.
Yeah, yeah. So what have you learned, uh, about yourself personally during, kind of this time, this COVID time?
Yeah, you sent that question and I was like, "Oh," it's like super hard. And I just, I feel like it sounds just super trite to say this, but and I'm sure like a lot of I mean, I'm not super happy with my response, but I kind of I do feel like I am surprised by my own resiliency,
Sure.
right?
Yeah,
And so I kind of I've learned that I could be more resilient than I thought I could be. But I also feel like, it I'm just amazed at the resiliency of like everyone. Um,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
think that um, this has been such a difficult time for everyone. And um, I just worked on the appeal letter for the Art Center Foundation, and it talks about, some people have been impacted much more than others,
yeah,
but we've all been impacted. And I can't really remember an experience like this where we're all dealing with stuff as a result. And there's this kind of
yeah,
sense of kind of collective um, you know, I mean, it fluctuates. It's like sometimes it's like collective grief and sometimes it's
yeah,
collective celebration, but we're all dealing with stuff. And
yeah.
that has been really, really amazing. I was listening to an artist conversation with Hank Willis Thomas, who
Mhm.
is an artist that I showed at the Saisset Museum many years ago, and does extraordinary work and had a one-person show that went to Crystal Bridges that I was actually hoping to see this fall. But
Okay.
he talked about this period has been a great awakening, and I think it's a really interesting. I just keep I like wrote that down, and I keep thinking about that, like
Yeah,
this idea around certainly around equity, but I think also kind of political awakening. Also, I
yeah,
think just a uh, an awakening around the kind of political divide and around inequities, and also kind of just so many like different kind of
yeah,
permutations of that. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, it's kinda when you're able to kind of like when we can, silence the noise, the real kinda issues start to bubble out, and I
Mm,
think that's the right? That's part of the difficulty of shelter in place is because your distractions are taken away either from food, if dance, music, even going to galleries, whatever it could be, friends. then you start to have to sit with yourself a little bit,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, although, I mean, I must say for those who have kids, I mean, I don't have children at home, but many of
Yeah.
my
It's
team
hard.
members do, and,
Yeah.
I mean, they're not sitting with themselves, they're sitting with
No.
all children trying to do Zoom education, and
Oh,
it's
yeah.
really intense, and so, I mean, maybe this is kind of I mean, I think for a lot of people, it's kind of trying to figure out, like, what is working with with education. Certainly, I mean, with my students, I'm trying to figure out, like,
Yeah.
is Zoom working? I don't know, you
Right.
know? I mean,
Yeah.
there are benefits and challenges to Zoom, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a crazy
So then,
time.
so kind of taking off Susan O'Malley's, what's some advice that you would give to your 8-year-old self?
Oh gosh. Oh goodness, that's really hard. Uh I think to have hope.
Mm,
You
yeah.
know, I think that, yeah, to have hope, and I think also just in terms of, you know, what museums are going to need to deal with, the fact that so many museums, like most of, I mean, the entire state of California almost is in purple, and as a result,
Yeah.
museums in the state are closed,
Yeah.
and I think it's having hope that we're going to be able to reopen, and we're going to be different, but we're going to be okay. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know, I think I was probably hopeful as an 8-year old, but to remind myself that, like, be hopeful, not
Yeah.
like in a Pollyanna way, not in an unrealistic way, but to be hopeful that things are going to be better. And
Yeah.
you know, I think actually it was Connie Martinez was talking about how, you know, this idea of not a new normal, but like a better normal.
Yeah.
In terms of some of the conversations that arts leaders in Silicon Valley are having, and I like that idea. I have
Yeah.
hope for a better normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. And then what would you say to your 80-year-old self?
You tried. You did okay. Right. Yeah.
You made it to 80. Yeah.
Did,
Yeah.
and you did okay. You know, there's one of the posters is like, uh, um, good job. One of the
Yeah.
Susan
Right.
Colley posters, right? You had a good life, good job. You know, I like that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing I've been noticing as I get older is that I think the younger conquering the world and the dragons has faded away to be like, wow, like I can be content in a good job done on something that's made an impact,
Yes.
maybe with a few people, rather than thinking I have to conquer the whole world, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
Do
you are doing a great job. Your 20-year-old self right now. The advice that I would give you is that you guys are doing a great job. I love what's happening at the Palo Alto Art Center and what you guys are doing, and you know, from the shows that you're doing, the classes in this program. So thank you for what you do to give, you know, voice to the community, creative voice to the community.
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing to enhance the creative life of Silicon Valley. Really appreciate it.
Sure.
Contact
Yeah.
is
Go
amazing.
team. Okay. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Find out more about the Palo Alto Art Center from their Instagram at Palo Alto Art Center or go to the City of Palo Alto's website. Thank you for listening to the Content Magazine podcast. Follow us on social media at Content Mag. Visit our website to become a member and help us to continue to tell the stories of the local creatives. This episode's music is Time Alone by Mild Monk. Follow him on Spotify and also on his Instagram at Mild Monk Music.